Today, I'm bringing the heat with Marie Lobbezoo, HR badass by day, historical reenactor by night. She's here to help me torch that tired, evil HR myth once and for all. Yeah, we care about the business. We care about the people behind the titles because we are humans too. And guess what? A lot of us, like Marie, have been on the other side of that awkward layoff talk too. We've lived it, we get it, and we're done being painted as the bad guys. So let's get into it. On Unplug with Mel, I'm your host, Mel Mosier.
All right. Wow. Welcome, Marie, to the Unplug with Mel. I am so glad we're meeting. We met through our evil minion time and with Suzanne Lucas, the evil HR lady. She nicely refers us to her minions, and we take it with a badge of honor. We have probably been dialoguing for a little over a year now, and it's been a learning curve for me. You come in from an HR background like myself, so introduce yourself. Let us know, the audience, who you are, Marie.
Well, hi, I'm Marie Lobbezoo. I am currently the Director of Human Resources for a company called Loss Prevention Services based in Natchez, Mississippi. I obviously am not from Natchez with this accent. I'm from the Midwest. I actually live in Michigan with my husband, who is an archaeologist. I have a wonderful son and his lovely wife and my bonus grandson. I am the proud pet parent of 3 cats and a dog. You may hear the dog singing the song of her people during this recording, so I apologize in advance. And that's just a little bit about me.
I think you just heard my daughter's dog. So we're in community here.
Yeah.
Well, our first question of our podcast is kind of a lengthy one, but it's an oversensus of your journey and to walk me through it. You can go as far as professional or personal as you like, but really keying into those setbacks and the challenges and how do you approach overcoming those? Again, personal life or professionally.
All right. Well, HR is a second career for me. I started doing HR in the wild, wild west days of the early 1990s after I was a professional plus size model for a while. And I started my journey like many other HR professionals from that time period. There weren't a lot of like degree or accreditation programs back in the 90s. So I just kind of fell into it. The company I was working for had a storefront. They needed someone to start helping with the management. So I started doing that. And I really discovered that I enjoyed human resources. So it went from there. I got my first real HR job in the early 2000s. And I had found my niche at that point. I was doing HR, I was doing payroll. And I went through, the ups and downs of the recession back in 2008. Got lucky, did not lose my job at that point. Continued my journey and just kept growing with the companies. I worked for some really great companies. I worked for some very toxic companies. But I always learned something. Maybe that's something that I learned was what not to do in any given situation or what a company should not be doing. But I took that as a positive lesson to do the right things and help mentor and coach people to do the right things for those processes. And then we all know what happened in March of 2020. I had just changed jobs and my state basically shut down for about 6 weeks. Other than essential employees, my employer was considered essential. They had to do some right sizing. So I got RFI'd in June of 2020 and then found another job and then lost that job due to layoffs. I went through 4 rounds of layoffs before I was laid off. Companies still exist, but in a very much smaller standpoint. They made some decisions during that time period they could not overcome, which a lot of companies faced that during COVID. They had to make decisions on the fly with not great information. And a lot of smaller companies did struggle, including the one I worked for. I returned back to Loss Prevention Services. I had left them in 2019 and have been there ever since, except for a short stint of a very interesting contract position. I was at McMurdo Station, Antarctica, doing human resources for about 3 months.
Wow.
2023, 2024. So that was a very unique thing that a lot of people want to hear about. I can tell you that penguins are loud and they smell bad. They smell like rotten fish because I was as close to them as, less than 3 feet away from wild live penguins. So
Wow.
yeah, that was kind of fun.
Now I'm not going to get that little fuzzy feeling around penguins. Well, for being in over 25 years in HR, you've seen a lot and you've done a lot. And I want to kind of bring into the conversation as when we talked about RFIs and layoffs, toxic companies and stuff is the detriment of what we do in burnout. We all experience in HR, whether we're just getting involved in it, it can hit quick and we don't realize those signs that we're in the wrong fit. And it's really weird to say that in HR, but because we want to be the fixer and do these things and you think we can help this culture, we can do this, but there's so much resistance from the top or even resistance from the bottom and you're stuck in the middle to know when to bolt, when to get
Right.
out of there. So walk us through some of those strategic things and RFIs and layoffs and how to deal with the burnout of toxic companies and stuff.
Well, having been on both sides of the RFIs, I've been the person saying, I'm sorry, you're being permanently laid off. And I've been the person receiving here's your severance package. Go away.
Mhm.
And it can be rough. It's how you handle it. Uh, it's traumatic, even if you know it's coming. And the second RFI I got in 2022, I knew it was coming,
Mm.
but it didn't make it any easier. But it was handled in the way it should be handled, was with dignity and respect. That there's, that you're taking away someone's livelihood. You're putting them in a bad spot. And yeah, you might get a severance package, you might get unemployment, but you don't know when that person's going to get another job or if they're going to get another job.
Right.
So it has to be handled with that dignity and respect. It has to be from a personal standpoint. If you're the one who's been laid off, you have to give yourself time to grieve. You have to
Mm.
acknowledge those emotions, bottling them up, trying to pretend everything's okay. That's not healthy because it's a grieving process. You have lost your job. You have lost, maybe lost contact forever with some wonderful coworkers that you may never see again. You may never hear from again. So it is a loss. It's traumatic. It's mostly unpleasant. And being on the other side of the table when that person burst into tears or the other person starts screaming and yelling at you. I've had employees take swings at me. It's just as part of being in HR. Even as respectful and dignified as you can treat them, they may not take it as well as they could. And you have to keep in mind in the moment that they are feeling very emotional and very overwhelmed and not hold that against them, even though they may say
Correct.
something very cruel or, swear and cuss or get physically violent. You just have to take it in stride, which I know sounds really strange, but, and then at that night you go home and you cry, or after they leave your office, cry.
You mean HR is human and we cry?
Yes, yes, we do. And that human part of human resources.
It's
But
real.
it is real. I can't tell you how many times, not even related to layoffs and stuff, talking to people about, they're going through a rough time in their life or a family situation. And, being there and being strong for them. And then when they leave your office, you have tears running down your face.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's a thing of awareness to know that most of us in HR have some level of empathy and emotional intelligence, and we feel as much
right.
as maybe we can't show in the meeting or whatever, but we take a time out. Our doors are shut intentionally sometimes, or when we get home and we sit down in our
Yeah.
recliner chair, we start to think about the day and we're like Susie or Bob or Joe. And it's really hard for the day to day. They're like, oh, HR actually does care. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We might have some limitations on us on what we can and cannot do, but we care as the human aspect of it all. You said
Exactly.
something very raw and real in there is, people's emotions at the time on the other foot when they're getting the term and or the RFI and they not aware of it. Like they don't see the writing on the wall. They're not in the meetings or the leadership teams of the strategic planning of we've got to do what we've got to do. And here's our first round of people. They're not reacting to you. They're reacting to what's going on at home going, I didn't prepare for this. I don't have a savings. I don't know the unemployment process. I don't know how to put food on my table tomorrow,
Right.
And so for some of our HR professionals that are newly into the game or coming in it from out of college, they may think it's at them and they're doing a terrible job, but part of that job is to be the bearer of bad news and walk them through the next steps. What would you say to some emerging leaders in HR that might be going through this in their next season in HR of RFIs in the community?
Well, one thing is check your state laws. And I live in the state of Michigan. And when we separate someone from their employment, we are required to give them information on how to file for unemployment in the state of Michigan. Other states have similar laws. So make sure you've got that information. Make sure you have those things printed out where you can hand it to the employee. Also, make sure if you're doing severance packages, is the person over, the age of 40? Are they under 40? Because there's different rules based on severance, based on people's ages. And
Mhm.
I'm thinking 40 is the cutoff. It might be 45. I'd have to look it up. But just make sure. And there's different state level laws having to do with severance packages. Some of them are age based. Some of them are based on other factors. So, if you're going to be doing an RFI, do your research. If you have a company legal counsel, lean heavily on them
Mhm.
so that you're doing the right kinds of things. And also, if you have someone else in that office with you, whether it's a general manager or whatever that person is, make sure they know what they can say and they can't say.
Big one right there.
Because they sometimes they're trying to be empathetic, they're trying to make the people feel better, and they can say things that can put your company at legal risk. So
Being proactive in the approach that you give an employee will help give the pace of calming their fears, giving them
mhm,
some piece of next steps, or just handing them a piece of paper and wishing them good luck. There's a very big difference. Um,
exactly. My mother's in an assisted living facility, and I had to go through all that process with that kind of thing. And I've got an employee who's going through the same thing right now, that they're getting ready to put their mother into an assisted living. So I've been helping coach them. It's like, do you have power of attorney? Do you have legal guardianship? All these kinds of things that people just don't think about until it happens to them. Yeah, a lot of times, we're not just psychiatrists and therapists, we're social workers as well.
Yeah,
And that's
because
a
on the flip
huge
of the script of there, we've got a demographic where grandparents are raising the grandchildren, and
Yep.
they may need empathy on scheduling and daycare and, flexible hours, and I mean, there's just a big ratio of the generation that we're dealing with. I mean, there's
Yeah,
5 decades in the workforce right now, and there's a
exactly.
lot of talk about the younger generation, and they don't have work ethic, but if you look at it, I wouldn't wanna be their age. Housing is unaffordable. They're living with their parents. They
Yeah.
have student debts out the wazoo, and they're
Mhm.
having to take an entry level position because no one schooled them that the degree that you got doesn't give you work experience. So you
Uh,
have to start somewhere, you
exactly. In
know?
my company, we have 18-year-olds, and the oldest employees we have are in their 70s.
Yeah, huge.
So
I mean, just
60
mind
years
boggling.
basically, yeah.
We're
And
looking at 70-year-olds can't retire? Nope.
well, not in this day and age, depending, unfortunately. A lot of people who are thinking about retiring are worried about the stock market and their
Mhm.
401ks taking a nosedive. So people may stay in the workforce longer than they plan simply because they're scared to retire because they don't think they've got the money. And that's a whole nother issue there as well. That someone who's planning on, oh, I got 2 more years, I got 2 more years. It's like, maybe I don't have 2 more years. Maybe I've got 5 more years I'm going to have to work or whatever that looks like. And that's a whole different supportive need there. To joke
Big
that my
time.
retirement plan is to only have to work part time as a greeter at a grocery store.
I heard that before with other people too, yeah.
Well, my husband is a small business owner. So, it will never be rich on it, but he's happy and satisfied and loves his business. And I'm very supportive of that. But how many other people are out there that we're kind of that middle income group? We're not rich, but we're not struggling like some other people. we make up the bulk of the population, I think, is, people that are kind of in that middle income group.
Oh yeah,
And
there's more resources out for those that are in their poverty level for the government than there is for that middle, that we're not quite hurting, but we can't get any assistance when we lose a job,
exactly. Other than unemployment or something of
other than
that nature.
unemployment, which has a cap.
Right.
Regardless of your income, it has a cap.
Right.
And it's also for a limited time offer.
Right,
You know,
exactly. So,
it
so
doesn't,
what
it's
do
not
you
forever
do?
and a day.
Yeah. And so what do you do and how do you support people? Because how many people are out there that we're serving as HR professionals that are in a similar position, that they're both working two-income household, just, barely, they're barely making it or kind of making it. If they lose that second income,
Oh,
can they pay their bills? Can they,
yes.
are they worried about paying their mortgage? Are they going to, get their car repossessed because they can't make the payments? All those kinds of things. And that's a big stressor in the workplace as well, is
It's
financial stress.
it's a huge one. It's also why there's still divorce rampant, because money, who's spending
Mhm.
what and where is it going to and how to cut back. Well, and you're depending on your demographic and where you live, if your mortgage or your rent and the variable of the government stuff, you might not be able to downsize your home and sell it for more affordable. Your rate keeps going up because there's no cap on how high they can charge you. There's all different variables in there, and that just makes panic,
And then
because
another thing that goes with that is a lot of divorced couples are still in the same house, sharing the same house because they can't afford to move. One of them or the other can't afford to move out.
and then
They
that
can't
brings
afford to
them
buy each
to
other
the
out.
generation of raising your kids in that type of culture. And it's
Exactly.
hard. It's just hard. And that stress comes into work. I grew up, well, in my younger days, I'd say, where you leave home at home and
Right.
you work and work. We're now seeing a shift where people in their mental health cannot shake off what's going in at home. And HR has to have a interruptible schedule so that they can come in and just unload. And we have to pivot into what resources are available to them that they are not aware of,
Right.
and just listening. Like, we can't fix everything, but we can be that source of, that's really hard.
Mhm.
I'm sorry you're struggling with that. How can I help you today so we can, get back on track? Would you like me to talk to your manager?
Right.
There's, just those open things. And they'd be like, no, Mel, I just really needed someone to know. And I'm like, it's confidential. It won't go any
Yep.
further than here. If you
Yep.
need to see me again tomorrow or whatever, if we need to have a 5-minute check-in every day for a moment, I'm good with that. Let's put it on the calendar. That extra step
Mhm.
keeps them in that mental health check. Like, okay, you want to talk to a therapist? We have an EAP program. You
Right.
get 6 free therapy sessions with it. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
If you need more after that, then it's affordable through your insurance that we,
Yep.
have for you. And so they just don't know, because at that moment they're overwhelmed.
Right.
They can't see past their nose on what they're going for or going through. And it's been instrumental in my career to really coach managers and leadership teams that it's okay if they bring it to work. If you hear about it, if you're hearing it at the water hole, go, have you talked to your HR? Have you talked to Mel? Have you talked to Marie?
Mhm.
And they'll be like, no, I didn't know that's what they were there for. And I'm like, send them, and we'll see what we can do. That way you don't have people quitting, because I had one, I would say, come
Mhm.
into my office ready to quit.
Yeah.
Home life was chaotic,
Mhm.
and they didn't know where to start. They thought leaving their secure, stable job was better for their home environment because of the schedule and all this other stuff. I took
Yeah.
15 minutes listening to him, and I said, you know what? We have counseling for your family, not just you.
Right.
You
Right.
can get counseling for your whole family. Give it 6 weeks. I'll check back in.
Mhm.
Let's see. And then also know your community resources.
Right.
What's
That's huge.
available in your town, but city-wise or whatever. And so I printed off the list and I said,
Mhm.
here's some other resources.
Yep.
I would start here, work your way down the list to see what you can get in. And they usually work with the school district.
Mhm.
So they should be able to help in that capacity. It was before 6 weeks when he came in and he was like, you know what? I'm so glad I just didn't react and quit. It's better. And I'm like, well, that's what we're here for. You know,
Exactly. We're not just here. okay, we're members of the Improv Your HR, Evil HR Lady Facebook
Yes.
group. We're both moderators on it.
Yes.
And the perception is that HR is evil. We are the people who fire people. But there's so much more to it. Like you were just saying, community resources. I operate in several states for where I work, and I have
Mhm.
community resources in, multiple states that I've had to reach out and build partnerships with because I do want to be there. You've lost your home. Okay, fine. Here's some assisted living shelters that'll help you and to get back on your feet. Here's how you sign up for Medicaid and SNAP and whatever else you need to have. Here's some community resources for low cost childcare, those kinds of things.
You
Because
said the right word there, partnerships.
yes, and that's the
HR,
thing.
if it had a manual,
Mhm.
we talk about employee handbooks and resources and EAPs and benefit plans, but if HR had a manual part, it's really about partnerships, with leadership team, with your managers, with your frontline employees, but in the community too, because we're just resources. Get it? Human resources.
Exactly.
And I think early on in my career, when I realized it wasn't just trying to follow policy and procedure. So sometimes it's okay, we need to do a little bit extra for this employee because they do great work. They perform
Right.
really well. And this is an unfortunate circumstance, like an eviction, and they're homeless and they're living in their car.
Right.
Like it bugs our mind because we know what we're paying them, but we don't know the situation.
Right. We just don't have
Divorce, split, whatever.
medical bills, all
Medical,
those kinds of
yes.
things.
We don't know everything. That's why don't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
Don't judge someone's situation from yours.
Right.
And when I started making those phone calls with WorkSource Solutions or, Habitat for Humanity and other things that nonprofits that provide just even 1 month's worth of rent can save someone from losing their home.
Or
You know,
groceries, food banks,
yeah,
those kind of things
yeah,
to
because
keep
SNAP
people.
takes a moment. It
Right.
takes a moment to kick in. So where's the food pantries?
Exactly.
And our team now goes and volunteers at the food pantry because we want to be able to give back to our community. But it took me about 8 years into HR realizing that I needed to be more human in this role, be more Mel. I wanted
Right.
to, but leadership was always policy, procedure, policy, procedure.
Right.
If you've got an HR like that, I get it. I get it. It happens.
Well, I'm a prime example. I'm a balance of both. We are in a very heavily regulated industry.
Mhm.
So I do have to make sure we're complying with policies and procedures. But I also have to have that human element. And that's something
Mhm.
that my team is so great with. I'm really good with the compliance and policies and procedures. I'm good with the human element. But my team is even better with the human element because they're in the larger community down there in
Ooh.
Mississippi. I live up here in Michigan. And yes, I can serve and mentor and help my team up here in Michigan, but that team down in Mississippi is helping them on site. And it's
And that's
amazing.
huge. Yes, that's huge. And you have to trust your team to be that extra human factor when you're, policy and procedure is critical. You can't just go off the rails and do what you want. And you have to keep it professional. You can't cross that line of I want to help in my own capacity versus what the business can do.
Well, I've helped in my own capacity a few times too. I've been known to slide somebody a couple bucks for gas to get them through the week. That
That's
kind of
different.
thing.
That's different. It's more than that. You just got to trust who, and make sure it's okay. Like they know that it's here. You don't have to pay it back, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's the human side of things. And we really feel for them. But policy and procedure, the way I explained it to in the past or currently is you've got a balance beam and HR is in the middle. You got the employer and the employee. It's got to do this. It can't do this and it can't do that. Because over here, you're losing people like flies. It's too
Mhm.
structured. It's too staunchy. There's no human factor to it. It's rules, rules, rules. And people won't stay in that type of culture forever. And then over here, you've got the human balance. You're stopping policy. You're just too focused on the human. So it's really got to be that fine line and that balance beam, and it works when it's done correctly. And we don't lose sight that these are people, not worker bees.
Right. And you
And
have
then,
to have that senior management buy-in for that kind of thing,
so let's
because
talk about that. What if you don't?
and that's the huge challenge, you know, especially in certain industries. Again, I work in a very heavily regulated industry,
Mhm.
straight up financial services. And we have to be so careful that we have to, we have to have this testing done. We have to have this done. We have to have this done. We have to have this done. And sometimes management gets very focused on this, and this has to be done now. It's like, well, hold it. This person's on a maternity leave, and this person's got a dying parent. And, so trying to help them see that human factor. And a lot of our leadership team is really great at that kind of thing, where they do see the human factor, and they try to understand. So they seek out that balance as much as they possibly can, keeping in mind that we still have to stay in compliance with all these regulations because
Mhm.
of the nature of our business.
Very mindful. I like that word, being very mindful in that. Well, the next question I have is for you in the journey of Marie, recognizing the importance of support in your own journey. Could you highlight anyone or maybe several, who knows, that has shaped you in your career and made you realize that you were made for HR, or when you were going through it and you didn't know if this is where you should have stayed into it with the RFIs and everything? Who's your sounding board when you are facing burnout, or you're just feeling too much of whatever everyone's going through at your companies?
Well, quite frankly, Suzanne Lucas, believe it or
She's
not.
mine too. Don't tell her. Oops,
Oh,
no.
Suzanne knows. She has been my mentor. I was one of her original moderators on the group back starting in like 2017. So I've been doing this for a while. And Suzanne and I developed a wonderful personal friendship in addition to this. So we do talk rather frequently outside of our Evil HR Lady channel. She's really helped take off some of the rough edges that I had. But I've also had a couple other really great mentors. Carrie Matthias, who I worked with at Amcor, amazing. She really worked hard to, again, those rough edges, because I was largely self taught for many years. And then more recently, I had a really great mentor when I worked at CSM Services named David Hagler. And Dave's local. He actually works just around the corner from where I live, and very experienced HR professional that really he's the perfect balance of, as we were talking about staying compliant but yet still having that human factor. I think he
Mhm.
exemplifies that. And
Mhm.
I learned a lot from both of them, and I'm truly grateful I got the chance to work with both of them. I also want to give a shout out to someone who I got to meet in I worked with her for a short time, got to meet her in New Zealand. Her name is Carol Kiefer, and she was coming back from Antarctica, and I was going on ice. So I got to meet her, and we've maintained our friendship. And she has been a wonderful mentor as well.
I love it. In reflecting in your journey with how you've done things, and was there any particular inspiring or memorable victory or success story that stands out to you as an HR professional?
I've had a lot of small victories over the years. I've had some very big ones that, um, some of them might seem, to other people maybe a little petty or insignificant. But there's those, times when you've been pushing and nobody's listening, and then finally that breakthrough comes up, and you
Mhm.
finally, you're doing the rocky thing on the steps, yeah, victorious, et cetera. um, I think my best successes have been when my team succeeds,
Mm.
and when they show me and the company what amazing people they truly are. Our recruiter has just it's a challenging market where she's working, and she just brings in results and brings in those great candidates and gets them onboarded with help from the other member of our team, our HR specialist. Just really gets those results done. I'm so proud of him. And then our trainer is amazing. He spends, the first week or 2 weeks with these people, these new hires,
Mhm.
to just get them up and running. And they do it competently and strongly and with great enthusiasm and dedication. And to me, that's a victory.
Oh, that is. It is. Teamwork makes the dream work,
It
when they're
does.
all working together for the purpose of people and business relations. I love that.
Yeah,
Well, our
I'm nothing
time.
without my team. I am absolutely nothing without my team. Yes, I can be a solo
Yes,
practitioner, but my team makes me great.
I love that. Give credit where credit's due in that we would not be without our team as well as we are in HR. It does take a team. We're doing it solo as a HR of one. If you don't have those resources, then you're part of communities like the evil HR lady. Come find us. It's a
Come
cool
find us.
group, because it's hard if you're doing it alone. I spent my beginning of things as the recruiter, the HR, the compliance. And if I didn't have a group like the evil HR, or even I'm part of other chapters that
Yeah.
help with that, I think I would have been like, oh, I'm throwing in my white flag. I'm out. I will go be that Walmart greeter.
Yep, exactly, and then I've had those times, it's like, "Suzanne talked me off a cliff."
And it's
And she
important to know that HR has their own outlets. We have to. We might not be able to be everyone's friend in the company, but we have our own outlet, and you need that. If you don't have that and you're listening in today, go find someone. Go find Marie on LinkedIn. She's there. She
Yeah,
will message you back
I will.
because she's been there. And it's very challenged for HR to reach out for help, saying, "Okay, I've got this on my plate, employee A, employee B, and here comes management, and I don't know how to wade through the water of this." And compartmentalizing it and restructuring it, giving it fresh eyes on it may help. That's why we have mentors. And I
Exactly.
wouldn't be who I am today without Marie and Suzanne. I'm still very infancy in my HR career compared to Marie and Suzanne, but I take it everything I can get.
Yeah,
We're
I
gonna shift.
consider a day wasted if I don't learn something new.
Amen. Amen.
And, we've
I'm
got
an
the other
ever learner.
moderators on the group. I want to give them shout outs too, Nina and Michael and Dr. Shanae. All of them bring so much different experiences to the table, and we can learn so much from each other. Michael's a labor relations specialist. That's the one part of HR that does not get any love whatsoever.
Mm-mm.
Kudos to him. But we always know if we have a union question, we can go to Michael. He'll know the answer. We
That's
all
yeah.
have different strengths, and that's what really makes us all great as part of the greater HR community. I'm a subject matter expert on certain things. You're a subject matter expert on certain things. And we have other people in the group that you can throw the most bizarre thing out there, and someone's going to be like, yeah, that happened to me last week. It's just like, it's amazing. So I do
Yeah.
encourage, if you don't have a local mentor, or there's not a local SHRM chapter or whatever, find the resources. There are good resources online, respectable ones that are supportive and do provide great information and moral support. Let's be honest. Sometimes you just need to be able to vent and say, oh my God, this happened. Does this ever happen to anybody else? And you get 8 people saying, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it makes
And
you feel so much better that this is not just you.
and it makes you feel less crazy too.
Yeah.
But in this podcast when it drops, we'll put some resources out because there's not just SHRM, there's fractional HR groups. Even our own Suzanne Lucas with Victoria has HR Learns.
Which is
Uh,
amazing.
yes, it is. And so it'd be very kismet that I'll be going to something, and then of course they're already on the ball, and there's a class to take over it, and I'm like, well, what a great refresher that was to partake in because I'm going through this right now.
Exactly. They
And
had a really
refreshers
great
are,
one earlier this week on background check investigations, which
which
was
is yeah,
really great.
yes.
Um,
I cannot say it enough that if you feel alone in your journey of HR, that you've got to be the one to raise your hand, reach
mhm,
out, and ask for help. It's okay. Every single HR professional in their career has truly done what Miss Marie just said. Talk me off the ledge. I'm about to jump. And we need everybody that's in HR to still want to be in HR because it is a ever evolving role, but it gets exhausting. And it's because it's about people and people,
yes,
I like them, but y'all, we are exhausting.
we are. And
And
I remain convinced people lay awake at night thinking this stuff up. I really do. Just sometimes it's like, where did that come from?
mhm,
and I wish it was less than once a week. But yeah, there's just sometimes it's like,
The bigger the company, the more it happens to. But I wonder too is I go, I think I've seen it all, and then whoop,
nope.
nope.
Yep.
So I will definitely make sure that there's some resources connected to this podcast because we've
Thank you.
talked very heavily in, um, you know, the hard parts of HR and talking in front of people on the worst moment of their day or of their year would be that RFI or
Yeah,
just a massive layoff.
right.
And we want our HR people to be prepared.
Or just, that somebody, you've worked with them and worked with them on a PIP, you've encouraged, you've mentored, and they still just don't succeed and you have to terminate them. And then, it's heartbreaking when that
It
happens.
is. I'm
Especially if
glad you
you've
brought
worked
that
with
up.
somebody.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think the worst part of terms when we advocate for a term because they haven't met their metric in performance and you like the guy, you like the girl, they're good people,
Yeah.
but we have a business to run. And I love when you said earlier that, we're not all about being evil and hiring and firing. There's always a misconception that HR is actually in complete control of the hiring and firing. It's not. We're not.
No, I would.
We are advisors. We will clearly give what we believe is the stronger candidate, but if the hiring manager decides to hire the other one, and I think one of the worst moments of the early career was I got a phone call chewing me out that they weren't selected.
Oh yeah.
And I get off the phone, I'm like, whoa, that was a dodge, bullet. We dodged it there.
Mhm.
Or we interview and we like them and they're a good interviewer and we get them onboarded and, give them as
Mhm.
many tools to succeed and they just don't.
No.
It's a gamble,
Yeah.
and that's why
To a certain extent. I'm still quite involved with the recruiting process in my company.
Mhm.
And on a fairly regular basis, we get candidates that just are challenging. And we do a lot of communications through our HRIS system, which is wonderful. We have a lot of messages. We try to respond to every candidate, even if it's something they don't want to hear. I have gotten everything from cuss words to three middle finger emojis. It's challenging because, again, we are dealing with people. We're dealing with a multi generational workforce, everybody from people who recently graduated from high school to people whose grandchildren are graduating from high school. Yeah.
and they're 70 in the workforce. They've got great grandchildren, maybe.
Yeah.
It's just a massive amount of people working and a massive amount of jobs still available.
And that's the challenge. And then, the whole thing with, well, everyone should be allowed to work remotely. And that's a huge challenge. I have the benefit of situational hybrid if necessary. Um, Not everybody has that. Some industries cannot work from home at all. Others are 100% remote and great about it. And that's a huge challenge for a lot of people who are recruiting because a lot of people want fully remote and they're just not that many positions available. You'll see it on LinkedIn, you'll see it on other forums that it's so challenging. It's like we just don't have it to offer in some cases as employers. And other employers, oh yeah, all of our positions are remote. And good for them if they can do it.
Well, I
My
mean,
company's kind of a mix.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's been jobs available remote, from beginning to before COVID,
Right.
depending on the industry. And now it's still in infancy now that it's more known because people or employers pivoted during
Mhm.
COVID to figure out how can they make this work long term or
Right.
hybrid, like you said, situational. But there are some industries that absolutely cannot go remote,
Nope.
period. And so if you've got a degree that or job skills that make it in person only and you
Right.
want to pivot to a remote, then you've got to make that decision to go find the next training or
Right.
degree or whatever. You can't be kind of mad at the employer for
Right.
saying this was a limited time. We were trying to keep everyone safe and healthy, but we've got to get back to the office. You know, I mean,
It
I
is
have
what it
a
is.
yeah, it is what it is. I'm fortunate that if I needed to work from home or I needed to work on the road, traveling different locations, I have that capacity,
Same here.
capability.
Yeah,
Uh,
same here.
but do I personally love to work remote full time as an HR person? No.
No.
I want to be where the people are. What's that
Yeah,
song
same.
from Little Mix? I want to be, that's
Yeah,
me, because I
same
feel like,
because no matter what, if I'm in Mississippi, I'm supporting the Michigan team remotely. If I'm in Michigan, I'm supporting the Mississippi team remotely.
yes,
So I'm always going to have a certain amount of the workforce that I am not going to physically be on that job site. I'm
yes.
available, but I'm just not physically sitting there in my office.
Yeah, I have 4 different locations. Luckily, they're all within an area radius. So if I needed to get there tomorrow, I could.
Yeah,
But if something's going down in one city and I'm in the other handling another situation, call the
exactly.
phone, let's schedule a meeting. I can't
Teams.
be at 2 places at
Yep.
once. But my phone, I'm really always available. Even if I got
Yeah,
a phone call tonight with an employee that wanted to discuss something
right.
privately, I would be available to them.
Same.
Well, our time is get pretty much up now because it's so good talking to you. So we're in that moderator group, but we don't get to chat like this all the time.
No, unfortunately, we don't, and I wish we did. I actually had a phone call with Shanae a few nights ago, and that was really nice.
Oh, she's an
You know,
amazing person.
we keep saying that we need to plan a vacation to the Bahamas together, all of us together, and maybe one of these days we will.
We
But,
do. Somewhere warm. I think that was Suzanne's request. Somewhere
yes,
warm and we can do it.
yes,
Because if for those that listening, our lovely Suzanne is in Switzerland.
yeah,
So we could all go crash at her place, you know.
yeah. She'd like that.
Well, the fun questions here, real quick, in this part is because you do have a very challenging job and a life. You're married and you've got kids and stuff. But what do you do to stop the work and unplug and have a little fun?
Okay, well, this is going to be completely unexpected. I know you know a little bit about this. I am a historical reenactor. I have a master's degree in World War II military history. So, not related to HR whatsoever,
I
but
love this. When I geeked when I learned this about you because I'm a huge history nerd. I don't have a master's degree in history, but I could have. And war. I mean, just the war, the reenactment. And I've seen some photos, and I just think they're absolutely phenomenal. But I love something common between you and Suzanne, real quick. Her degree is not HR either;
no,
it's in political
that
science.
is
And I
science.
was
Yeah.
like, what are the odds? Both of these two mentors in my life, went out to this life and going, we're going to do this. And then, nope, we end up in HR.
Human
And then,
resources is the history of someone's tenure with a company. So,
yes,
a lot of the research techniques and documentation techniques are very similar. So, that's kind of where I put the parallel in. That being said, I'm going to be running around in a World War One uniform next weekend, not Easter weekend, the following weekend at a World War One reenactment. So,
where at?
Midway Village in Rockford, Illinois. This is an annual event. Part of the group, one of the groups I belong to, is the Russian Women's Battalion of Death, which is a crazy name. During World War One, after the Tsar abdicated the throne in Russia, there was a provisional government under Alexander Kerensky, and he formed, with the help of Maria Barkacheva, a female Russian soldier, an entirely female combat unit that actually saw battle in June and July of 1917.
Wow. I could listen to you talk about history all the time. So I gave you another career option. Record yourself for Audible about all your reenactment in the war. You know,
I
like
don't think too many people would be that interested in it.
I would.
There's certainly people who would be, but I'm not a
It's
recognized. Yeah, I'm just
we
a
can make
fun.
it. We can make you recognized. We can. It's
I just
very.
enjoy it.
Is it a pretty big group of people that are involved in this still?
The reenacting community, especially here in the United States, is huge because we have so many different eras. We have people that do everything from Renaissance to First Gulf War.
Oh wow.
So in
Wow.
my local area, the Michigan, Illinois, Indiana um, area, in Wisconsin, there's a large group of people that do Renaissance, Civil War, World War One, World War Two, some Vietnam. So there's a little bit of everything. It just depends on what you're into. There's a few people who do Span Am. Sometimes there's events, they call them timeline events, where you'll have one group's doing this group, one group's doing that, those kinds of things. And it's a great experience, if you want to bring kids out for that kind of thing. And people do this throughout the US. I just, have knowledge because I live in Michigan of what's
Mhm.
local to me.
I love that. And way to escape the real world in a little bit and still stay tuned into why we are America and how this all began. Like keeping that in the forefront of
Right.
we're still very young as a country and some of our rights and stuff like that, my biggest thing in history is I had a professor, or he was a professor, but he was teaching 8th grade, and he showed up in reenactment gear to the point where he made us go outside and we were making the naan bread
Mhm. Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
giving us culture of what the
Mhm.
experience was. And that's when I was like, this made a whole difference in just reading the textbook.
It's
Like
very
I
different.
wanted to read everything at that point. And I did every college, every high school. I took as many different history classes as I could because the more you know, you
Right.
understand.
The greatest thing about living history and events like what we do is because you can hear it, you can see it, you can smell it.
Hmm.
All those kinds of things. A dry history book is just that. A museum. I love museums, don't get
Oh,
me
me
wrong.
too.
I was just at the World War II Museum in New Orleans last weekend.
Right.
But it's when you're actually there and you're actually, you're hearing the gunshots. You're
Hmm.
feeling the cannons as they go off.
Smelling the
You're on the
gunpowder.
campfire and the cooking and the
Yes.
cordite and all, the horses. How many kids have been around horses, especially if they're
Hmm.
inner city kids?
Yes.
To see the horses and they just don't see this stuff.
Oh, I
So,
love it. I
it's
love
part
that
of
you
my
bring it.
lifelong education thing that, I want to help people learn.
And I love that you get to do that, and I get to just be a sponge on your trips and stuff, and maybe one day I'll get to go out and do something because I never thought about myself doing that, but it's totally up my alley.
That can be arranged.
I mean, I'm down for it because I never knew, like, you're in your Indiana, Wisconsin, and all that stuff, you know that, but I've never even researched what's in Texas, and I'm pretty sure it's a huge,
Oh, there's a large
you know,
reenactment
for
community in
Texas
Texas.
based. But I'm a nerd, and the more I know, the more I get to be in it, and it might help my kids who are my younger ones get better at history. Now that I
Yeah.
think about that,
Well,
well,
one
my
of the
last
largest I was gonna say one of the largest Renaissance fairs in the United States is in Texas.
yes, I have heard of
Mhm.
it, but you know what? I've never been, and that's pretty
Okay.
sad.
Well,
But
okay.
maybe I'll put it on my bucket list. So,
Mhm.
my last question for you, Marie,
Mhm.
is a quote or a piece of advice or even something a mentor or a famous person has ever said that has stuck to you that you would like to give out to the audience today.
I will, and I'm gonna give this, from, I believe he was the COO of the company. His name was Larry Talby. And Larry once said to me in a conversation, sometimes no answer is the only answer.
Mm, yes, I like that.
I've
Oh,
always kept that in mind. It's resonated with me that you may not ever get an answer, and that is your answer.
yeah, closure doesn't always happen the way we want it to,
Yep.
and sometimes silence is enough.
Yep.
Like,
Agreed.
don't
Same
be
here. Yep.
move forward.
Yep.
Don't keep, what is it, beating the dead horse?
Yeah, don't keep beating a dead horse. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you just
uh,
gotta let it go.
I love that. Well, I thank you for your time.
Ah,
What a wonderful time to connect and stuff, and put you on Unplug with Mel. I will get all your information out there as well when this podcast drops, as well as resources and how to plug into other chapters or even to find the Evil HR Lady's group that we monitor and everything like that. But I appreciate your time. I got to learn so much more about what you do and how it all began. So I appreciate it.
well, thank you for having me on, Mel, and I'm looking forward to seeing the podcast when it comes out. I understand you had another one of our moderators that you did a
I
recording
did.
with as well, so I'm looking forward to that one too. As you
Yep.
do. So, but thank you so much for having me on the show.
You too. Until next time.
All right, sounds great.